Now marketing, successful marketing starts with understanding the consumer. And to understand the consumer, you really need to look at 3 different perspectives of the consumer. One, you need the demographics, which is the facts and figures of the marketplace. 2, you need purchase behavior. You need to understand where people are shopping, how they're spending, what they're buying, and you need psychographics. And that's a marketer's term for psychology, the psychology of the consumer. And I use the term, and that was the title of my first book, is why people buy. Why people are buying the products, because that's getting at the psychology. So we need those 3 perspectives. And I'm going to start my discussion with the demographics of affluence, because really, when you start understanding the consumer market, you really need to understand the demographics first. And these, again, are the facts and the figures. It tells us who's buying the product. It helps us understand how big this pie is called the wine market and the affluent market. Now first, affluence is defined by income. So that's the first demographic characteristic that we really need to understand about our consumer. And I deal with the media quite frequently, and I find very low levels of understanding about demographics. So I'm going to spend a lot of time on this because I think it's really important for us to know. Overall, there's about 120 million US households. That's not a whole lot of, it's not a really big number of households. And if you divide those 120 million households into segments of 1/5, dividing them into 5, the top tier, the top quintile, the top 20% accounts for roughly 24 million households. So if we're looking at this ball called the US economy, the US consumer market, you really are targeting about 24 million US households in total. Now we can cut it a little bit further, the top 5%, the top 2%, the top 20% starts at $100,000 and above. And people laugh when I say that in New York City and here in the San Francisco, California area. That's way too low. But that's the facts. I mean, the reality of our economy is the top 20% starts at $100,000. Top 2%, which is what I call the ultra affluent, starts at $250,000 and above household income, and there's about 2.4 million of those households. Now, I've done a lot of work on understanding the different segmentations of the affluent market. We can cut those affluents as top 100 at 100,000 and above in different ways. But what I've discovered is there are really only 2 income segments at the top that anybody really needs to focus on. One is called the Henrys. And that's a term, that was a phrase coined by Fortune magazine writer. The Henrys are the high earners, not rich yet. And those are people with incomes from about $100,000 to $250,000. So those are the Henrys. And they behave very much similarly. And it's interesting, if you think about corporate, people who work in corporations, $250,000 is about the top where most corporate people are paid, other than CEOs. So we're really talking about sort of those Henrys. They're people that are making a lot of money relative to the rest of the economy, rest of the households, but they're not rich. And then you have the ultra affluents who are making $250,000 and above. And what is interesting, because again, I'm the numbers person, and what is really interesting to me is this, if we look at each of these steps of that income ladder, you see that the average income of that segment from 100 to 150,000 skews back down to the lower level of that income range. So about $120,000 is the average. For each of the segments, up until $250,000, the average income of that segment skews down to the lower number, except in the ultra affluents. And that's where the average income is going really close to $500,000 for the people in the top 2% of the US household. And what that tells you is there are not very many people making from about $250,000 to about $350,000. Just not too many households there. We really are talking about, when we talk about ultra affluence, we really and truly are talking about people who are rich. Now, what this number analysis does, and we need to really look and study and understand what these numbers mean. The fact is, the Henry households, there's 10 Henry households to every 1 ultra affluent household. So, while the ultra affluent households are spending 3 to 4 times more on average on luxury than Henry households, the fact is they cannot sustain, they alone cannot sustain this luxury industry that we have grown during the boom times. They're only spending 3 to 4 times more, but there are far fewer of them. The Henry households really do represent a significant opportunity, I think, for you in that $15 to $25, $35 a bottle range, because there's so many more of them. They may not spend huge amounts of money individually compared to an ultra-affluent, but they do spend collectively. They are a very, very big segment. So we can't write off the Henrys, and I see lots of luxury consultants advising that the answer to all your problems is just simply move up the income ladder. Go higher, and then your problems are solved. Get higher spending people into your marketplace and buy your products. But I don't think that's the answer, because, again, the numbers just do not work out. Another thing that's happened to this marketplace based on income is that the middle income consumers, people from 35, households from 35 to $100,000, they have come out of this recession significantly much greater hurt than before, and they have lost a lot of spending power. So we're seeing an increasingly poor middle class, and what that's going to mean is that marketers who depend upon mass market, they depend upon the middle class for sales, are going to start looking at your customers. The affluent customers are going to come after your customers and be really they're going to want their share of that top 20%. And here's a perfect example of a competitor that is going seriously after the affluent consumer, and that's Procter & Gamble. They're a consumer packaged goods giant, and they have marketing muscle like unbelievable, and they are now staking a claim to the luxury consumer. With Dolce & Gabbana in particular, that's their fragrances. Dolce & Gabbana is that they're also with Procter & Gamble coming out with a line of color cosmetics that today will be sold exclusively in Saks Fifth Avenue stores. So Procter & Gamble, they're not satisfied with Comet and Tide and Swiffer Mott's anymore. They're going after the luxury affluent consumers. Another key demographic characteristic of the affluent market is they are highly educated. This statistic astounds people that less than a third of all US households are headed up by a person who has a Bachelor of Arts degree, a BA degree. It's amazing. And if we look at that's the overall population, if we look at the affluent market, top 20%, 60% of those households are headed up by people with educations of bachelor's or more. So what you're looking at with an affluent consumer is a smart consumer who is getting smarter all the time. They know how to use the tools that help them determine value. They know how to measure value. And these are people that are working. They have very sophisticated skills. They're people like you. You are working and dealing with budgets all the time. They know how to manage their own personal budget. They know how to decide whether something's worth it or not to buy. So these are good shoppers, smart shoppers, and you really can't underestimate them. And they have discovered by being good shoppers that they can actually live 1 or 2 rungs up the income ladder simply by making good choices with their money. Another demographic characteristic of affluence is it comes in middle age. And if we look at the age ranges and the income levels, this is a household income by age of the householder. And it shows us that there's a window of affluence when personal income is at its highest is from 35 to 54 years old. It's a 20-year window of affluence. Now, we can't dismiss the people from 55 to 64 years old, and they make a lot more than people from 24 to 34 years old. But the fact is, highest income from 35 to 44 or 54 years old. But not all of these consumers in that window of affluence are of equal value to you as a marketer. And this data is confirmed by, Mark showed the same sorts of differentiation. The younger affluents, the people who are in that first 10 years of affluence, the window of affluence, spend significantly more money, 2 to 4 times more on luxury goods and services than people who are more mature. And the reason is young affluents are in an acquisitive life stage. Their life stage is such that they are buying, maybe not their first home, but they're buying their second or their third home. They are acquiring things. They are acquiring luxuries that they didn't have the pleasure and the ability to buy when they were younger. Versus a more mature affluent who's really got a house full of stuff and is often in a downscaling phase of their life where they're actually selling off luxuries or moving back to a lower level of income. Young affluents overall are significantly higher value to you and everybody that's in the luxury market. So you're really going to have to think of ways to appeal to this younger consumer who is 35 to 44 years old. And those are generally, today, made up of the Gen Xer population. Now, because younger affluents are more important to you, that brings a particular challenge for you as we look to the future. Because one of the beauties of age demographics is if we all get 1 year older, even though I wish we didn't, but we all are getting 1 year older every year. So we can project the age of the population overall. And if we look at the window of affluence, what we find is that the number of young affluents is going to go down from about 2010 to about 2020. The next decade, this next decade coming up, means that it's going to be that the young affluents are going to be fewer on the ground. They're going to be thin. There are not as many of them. The luxury market is going to be dominated by people from 45 to 54 years old who are spending less money overall. And it brings up what I call the luxury drought. And the blue line is the older affluents, the yellow line is the young affluents. So we're really not going to see the young affluents making headway in terms of sheer numbers until 2019 or 2020. So we're really looking at an extended period of time based upon the demographic aging of population where we have got people of a certain age, more mature, dominating the market, who have less interest, generally, in buying luxury goods. So it really is a drought. And you, as wine growers and people who understand about grapes, understand that drought doesn't mean that they're all going away, but it does mean that you're going to have to work harder, you're going to have to work smarter. You are going to have to really up your game to really make headway and find growth, because organic growth in the marketplace, the luxury marketplace, is really not going to happen.